Hey guys, ever heard the term stroke volume? Ever wonder why it might be so important? Well, today you're going to learn the foundations of stroke volume and the Frank Starling's Law. So let's get started. No matter what medical provider you speak to, whether nurse, doctor, EMT, or paramedic, they will tell you that without sufficient cardiac output, your patient will inevitably go into shock. Cardiac output is measured by the equation stroke volume times heart rate equals cardiac output. What this equation is saying is that over the course of 1 minute, a certain amount of blood will be shot out of your heart and into your body. This total amount of blood per 1 minute is cardiac output. The amount actually shot or ejected out of your heart per beat is the stroke volume. Now, to better understand Frank Starling's Law and the full concept of stroke volume, we are going to jump onto the computer and draw the rest out. So a little bit of history here to start us off. Otto Frank in 1895 was the first one to start thinking of this concept, right? And then in 1914, Ernest Starling, a English scientist, Otto Frank being German, Ernest Starling being English, in 1914 kind of added on to his previous hypotheses and tests, and together they became the Frank Starling's Law. All right, now that we have history out of the way, we need to move on to certain terms, okay? Now, we're always talking about stroke volume. That is the major function of, Starling's Law. Frank Starling's Law is stroke volume. Remember, the stroke volume is always determined and changed via three things: the preload, the afterload, and then contractility. Okay? Always affects stroke volume. Okay? You change the preload, the afterload, the contractility of the heart muscle itself, you're going to directly affect the stroke volume. Okay? Now, there's a couple other terms that we have to be familiar with. The first is abbreviated EDV, and that stands for end diastolic volume. Okay? And then you have the ESV. Guess what this is, right? The end, if we have diastolic, we need systolic volume. Okay? Now, let me change colors here. Okay, we're going to go to red. So remember, guys, we have blood entering the heart via the superior inferior vena cava, right? It's going to enter the right atrium. It's going to move down into the right ventricle, and it's going to fill, right? It's going to fill. But we also have blood coming into the left atrium as well. And that's going to inevitably go down, and it's going to fill. Okay? And we'll say all this is filled here in your left ventricle. Okay? Now, what we're talking about with this end diastolic volume, okay, is how much blood is going to fill up the ventricles, okay, right before they contract. Remember, diastole is the time of rest for your heart. It's when all of your ventricles are filling with blood, okay? And typically, we are going to see approximately 120 mLs of blood fill up this ventricle, okay? And that is going to be your end diastolic volume. The amount of blood at the end of diastole, the resting period right before another squeeze, that is going to be filled, in this ventricle. Now, the end systolic volume is how much blood typically is going to be left after the heart pumps, okay? So let's change to white here, okay? And say that we have now had a ejection, okay? But now we only have, we'll say that much blood in there, okay? And this volume is the residual volume of that beat. And typically, this is going to be somewhere around 40 to 50 mLs. Okay? So you can subtract these two to say that each beat, or the ejection fraction, is going to be around 70 mLs of blood. Okay, now, this difference also equals your normal stroke volume. A normal stroke volume is equal to 70 mLs of blood. Okay, so that is very important. Now, where does Frank Starling's Law come into play here? Okay, Frank Starling's Law says that preload is going to affect contractility. Okay, now remember, preload is we're filling up this ventricle with blood. Okay, we're getting our end diastolic volume. Okay, it's filling. And preload is the amount of stretch that these muscle fibers are going to have. Let's do it in green here. Okay, so as this fills up with blood, these walls are going to stretch. These inside myocyte cells are going to stretch. And they're going to make this ventricle bigger so it can fit all of that blood, all of that 120 mLs of blood inside of that ventricle. Okay? This is preload. Preload is just a fancy word for stretch. Okay? You're stretching that ventricle out to get the most amount of blood within it. Okay? But then it beats. So Frank Starling's Law says that the more preload, okay, so the more preload, which is saying the more stretch that you have, the greater the contractility. Okay? The greater the contractility will be. So to eject all of that blood, you're going to have a greater force behind that ejection of blood. Okay? The less preload, the more flabby the heart is, the weaker the contractility, the weaker the stress. Okay? Just think of it like a rubber band. And I'm going to do a demonstration right after this that you can visually see exactly what I'm talking about, because this is literally a rubber band theory. But just remember that the Frank Starling's Law, okay, will say the more preload that you have, the more stretch within those ventricles that you get, the greater the contractility of that heartbeat will be. Okay? Remember, guys, that this whole concept mimics a rubber band. Your ventricles are your rubber band. As the rubber band expands, it tightens, filling with blood. When the rubber band is let go, all of that force and contractility is exerted. The bigger the rubber band is stretched, the more contractility and force behind the snap. The less the rubber band is stretched, the less amount of contractility and force with the snap. Well, guys, that's it for today's video. Make sure to check out our brand new Patreon page to become a Medic Materials VIP provider and get access to tons of exclusive Patreon-only content. Like, subscribe, comment on this video, and check out these two videos right here for more awesome information. Stay safe out there, and I will see you guys in the next video.